Lawyers of Reddit, when did you know the person you were defending was royally screwed? Story 1. The frozen chicken trade. Never ask a question to which you do not know the answer. Prosecutor suggested to me, client, that the canned goods he had burgled were to be used to trade for drugs. Me, thinking the idea ludicrous, asked my client whether he has ever traded food for drugs, to which he replied that he once exchanged a frozen chicken for heroin. Needless to say, I did not win that one. Story 2. The passport slip-up. Set in the public gallery at a bail hearing for a man accused of heinous crimes against a very, very young female relative. The judge started laying out the conditions of bail, and one of them was to surrender his passport. Man turned to his attorney and said, loudly, words to the effect of, "But you said I could fly back to my home country." The judge stopped himself and revoked the man's bail. Edit. This post brought to you by the words, flight and risk. Also, his home country was out of reach of extradition. Edit again. This was not in the USA. Every country has foreigners. Story 3. The mentor matching the description. Not exactly in court, but I was defending a juvenile robbery case, where there was very little evidence. There were supposed to be 2 guys, but they only picked up this one kid. He had no stolen property on him. He was picked up like outside his own house, wearing different clothes than the victim had initially said. This kid was on the honor roll at school. His family seemed kind and were involved. He wrote poetry and played instruments. I actually believed it was a legit mistaken identity case. I went to meet with one of the kid's mentors for a character reference, and he exactly matched the description of the other robber. Story 4. The instructed witnesses. I was just interning in court during law school, but I'm a lawyer now. Fight in a club. Someone had broken someone else's jaw and had 6 friends with him that insisted he had been identified wrongly because he never have a beard, and the victim said he had a beard. They used a very specific phrasing to the tune of, "My friend doesn't have facial hair because he is a professional in the food industry and it would go against the regulations." After 3 of the witnesses had repeated the same exact phrasing, the judge stopped one to ask if he knew what a couple of the terms in that line meant, and the witness couldn't explain it. Defense lawyer got busted for instructing the witnesses. She'd also gotten the defendant to reject a plea deal that exchanged prison time for a fine and community service. Story 5. The judge's prior knowledge. Represented a pro bono client that had just turned 18 and was charged with serious property damage. I walk into his bail hearing and the judge looks at him and goes, "I knew you would be back as an adult." The judge then turns to me and says, "Counselor, you may want to learn about your client's history." No bail. Edit. To answer some of the questions below. 1. I considered it to be extremely inappropriate and objected to it. Juvenile records are sealed for a reason. The judge overruled the objection but made sure to articulate that his denial of bail was for reasons related to the instant case. Story 6. The neighbor's housebreaker. I have another one that I have just remembered, representing a guy accused of housebreaking. Managed to persuade the prosecutor that they could not prove it, so they dropped the case at the intermediate diet, procedural hearing, before the case called in court. Headed downstairs to the cells to break the good news to my client, who was remanded in custody. Have an idle glance at the details of the charge while I'm waiting for the cell's staff to bring him out. The house that was broken into was my then next-door neighbor. Client was delighted that he was getting out. Him, "Aw, cheers, pal, you are the man." Can I? Wait. TAE, get out. Me, no bother, right? See that place you definitely did not break into? I live next door, so gonna leave my house and car alone, please? Him, "Aw, sure, pal. Me and the boys go up there stealing all the time. What car do you drive?" I told him what kind of car it was. Needless to say, my car was broken into about 3 weeks later. Story 7. The incriminating jacket. Literally the first thing I ever did was just a law student intern. Guy has a legit defense on a drug possession case. Drugs found in a jacket. Guy wasn't wearing jacket. They were going to have a very difficult time proving the jacket belonged to my guy. Had a long meeting with client. Explained everything. Client was excited. Day of the preliminary hearing. Guy shows up and sits down directly in front of the officer who arrested him, while wearing the jacket in question, the exact same jacket we were going to say they couldn't prove belonged to him. Story 8. The DNA baby evidence. Probably my client charged with statutory rape, multiple counts, who impregnated his high school sweetheart's daughter after having inappropriate relations with said daughter from the ages of 13 to 15. He was 35 at the time of the birth. DNA in the form of a baby is strong evidence for the state. Story 9. The social media evidence overload. My dad had a client who was on trial for being a felon in possession of firearms, possession of stolen property, burglary, and distribution of narcotics. Guy had multiple pictures of himself on Facebook, holding guns, drugs, and cash, and had videos of himself both breaking into someone's house and stealing a gun, as well as selling crack on several occasions. Despite my dad basically telling the genius he was going to prison either way, and to plead out for a reduced sentence, dude still pleaded not guilty. We still occasionally joke that the guy clearly wasn't competent to stand trial by virtue of being so dumb. Story 10. The fired alibi witness. I am being sparse on details here due to confidentiality, but I had a client who was accused of a very nasty sexual offense. He had an alibi. He was at work, where he was the boss. He had an employee who could absolutely vouch for his being there. I talked to the employee confirmed this. It gets closer to the trial, and around the time when I need to send in an alibi notice, which is advance notice to the Crown, so that they can investigate the alibi and determine whether or not it's true. But I am being careful, so I call the employee up again. Turns out my client fired him in the interim, and so the employee quite candidly tells me, "Oh yeah, he was definitely at work. But that's not what I'll say in court. Fuck that guy, he is going down." I did not call him as a witness or file the alibi notice. Still won the trial, but if I hadn't thought to call the guy, or if he'd been less candid, my client would have been fucked hard. Sex offender registry. Jail time. The works. Completely innocent. Story 11. The gurgling 911 call. I listened to a 911 call where the victim was severely injured while on the call by our client. I will never forget her sounding like she was dying. Somehow she ultimately lived through this, saying, "He harmed me, he harmed me." Story 12. The starving stepmother. I'm on the other side, but I've got a defendant who went to prison for starving 3 adopted children to the point that they needed weeks of hospitalization, then got out of prison and married a guy with children so that she could start starving them too. Listening to her interview where she attempts to justify what she did to both sets of kids disturbed me more than any of the harm cases I've worked on. Story 13. The child porn evidence review. When I had to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office to view the evidence in his case, there they were, the hundreds of images of child porn he had traded, the close-up images of his baby's genitals that he had taken and sent around the internet, the pictures of his neighbor's daughters playing in their kiddie pool. Realized he just could not help himself. But he also never once claimed responsibility or showed remorse, so I do not feel too badly for him. Story 14. The window counteroffer. I had a client who was accused of domestic violence. Essentially, he threw his girlfriend out of a second-story window. Now he has got a terrible history, but so do a lot of my clients, and his attitude is a little entitled, also typical. But he also knows the deal and wants a plea deal. So I'm not really prepared when he absolutely refuses the no-jail offer from the state. Keep in mind there were like 5 witnesses. Why? Because they wanted him to pay for her medical bills. Okay, an asshole, but whatever, not the worst. What if it was his counteroffer? I ain't paying that bitch's bills. Tell them I'll pay for the window. Prosecutor was not happy. Story 15. The fake doctor steroids scam. Criminal defense lawyer. I can name a few instances where I was just absolutely disgusted with my client. Caveat, these are mostly years ago when I was taking just any old case. I most practice white-collar and federal now. Client who pretended to be a doctor so he could sell steroids. According to the Gov, he had numerous clients who were made to believe that his steroids would cure their cancer. They paid him hundreds of thousands of dollars, and some of them died. I just thought that was pure evil. Story 16. The drunk hug after victory. I won a DUI case because the government messed up on something right before trial was to begin. My client gives me a hug and completely reeks of alcohol. He has driven to court. I took his keys and called his mother. Story 17. The molesting justification. Client who was accused of molesting a 12-year-old. He was mid-40s at the time, and I had to shut him down real quick when he tried to tell me how the 12-year-old was coming on to him. Story 18. The theft from lawyer's office. I represented a woman for a grand theft charge, left her in my office to get some things copied before she left. After she left, I realized my sunglasses and car keys were stolen. I tracked her down in the lobby and told her I was not going to represent her anymore, and I would call the police if she did not empty her pockets in front of me and give me my things. Story 19. The released murderer's assault. I had a client who was released after 25 years in prison for harm, and then the same day he beats up his prospective new landlord. He ended up getting another 10 years. He was unrepentant and laughed about how he hit the guy so hard his eyeball popped out. I thought this guy deserves to be in prison. Took the case to trial anyway and, shocker, lost, and he got 10, the max. Story 20. The stolen stuff question. I tried a theft case where, after a not guilty verdict, my client leaned over and asked me, "What do I do with the stolen stuff?" How did I feel? Just fine. Actually, in that case, I felt amused, because my client did not care if he got found guilty. He just wanted to make the government waste as much time and money as possible, and he was rewarded for his efforts. Story 21. The cocaine-coated coat catastrophe. A woman claimed a laundry ruined her expensive fur coat, which was already stained, but the laundry disputed this. The judge ordered a lab analysis, and the coat had traces of cocaine and other illegal substances. A raid at her place followed, and her husband was convicted after several kilograms of substances were found, derailing the case and exposing a criminal network. Story 22. The blind witness blunder. In a case, the son of the opposing party lied about being blind to seem sympathetic. During the trial, their counsel asked him to take the oath, and he picked up the card and read it, revealing he wasn't blind. The judge dismissed the case in our client's favor shortly after, leaving the courtroom stunned by the blatant deception. Story 23. The drunken driver's deadly secret. In a civil trial for injuries from a motor vehicle accident, the defendant denied prior incidents, claiming it was a one-time mistake. During cross-examination, it was revealed he had a prior DUI conviction in another state where a child died. The plaintiff's counsel asked if he remembered the child's name, shocking the jury and sealing his fate with increased punitive damages. Story 24. The porn-fueled pole crash confession. In a negligence case, the client argued a lack of streetlights and a cyclist caused him to hit a wire pole. Discovery revealed the first respondent's report. The driver was found in the driver's seat, pants down, with porn playing on his phone. This admission of distraction made it clear who was negligent, collapsing the case instantly. Story 25. The secret side business sabotage. In an unfair dismissal case, the client claimed racial bullying led to her firing from an accounting job. It later emerged she was running her own accounting business using the employer's facilities during work hours. Confronted, she argued her clients wouldn't have gone to the employer anyway, but the revelation weakened her case, settling for a small amount. Story 26. The jailhouse confession catastrophe. As a public defender in an area with meth use, many clients forget to mention they confess to crimes on recorded jail phones while high. One client called his mom, confessing and brainstorming alibis I was relying on, which was used against us in court, undermining our defense and leading to a guilty verdict. Story 27. The forgery fiasco in court. Representing a guy in a civil case involving a forged signature, He denied forgery, despite my advice that admitting it could help build a defense. At trial, evidence proved he forged it, cutting up our case. His refusal to be honest left us unable to adapt, resulting in a loss and a lesson in client transparency. Story 28. The custody case, child abuse cover-up. In a custody case, the client failed to mention he was previously convicted of felony child abuse for breaking 16 bones in an infant's body. This critical detail, revealed during proceedings, destroyed any chance of gaining custody, leaving the courtroom in shock and the case in ruins due to his omission. Story 29. The marijuana tattoo mistake. In a 1980s marijuana trial, my client always wore pants to my office, but wore a dress to court, revealing a marijuana leaf tattoo on her ankle. The jury noticed, and despite our defense, her visible affiliation with the drug led to a guilty verdict, a dramatic moment that sealed her fate in the courtroom. Story 30. The back injury blunder in court. A woman sued for a severe back injury, preventing work, claiming it impacted her life. During trial, a pen rolled off the table, and she stood up, bent over to pick it up, and sat back down, as if fine. When the judge asked if she was okay, she snapped, "What are you staring at?" Her attorney tried to salvage it, but no one believed her claims after that. Story 31. Tree trimming company cuts down wrong yard. I represented a tree trimming company that went to the wrong address and cut down all the mature trees in that yard. The right address was 100 North 4X Street, and they went to 100 South 4X Street and hacked away. I still have no idea why the insurance company didn't settle pursuit, given the clear mistake. Story 32. Embezzler sues for unfair dismissal and wins big. A lady was sacked by a large company for embezzling money to fund a gambling habit, with clear evidence and no denial. She sued for $300,000 for unfair dismissal. My sister's firm gave it to her as her first solo case, but she screwed up badly, losing and getting the court to award the woman $500,000 instead. It made my sister known to the partners, though. Story 33. Client wants to sue God for Adam's sin. A guy wanted to sue God because it was unfair to blame the rest of us for Adam's poor choice. I had to deal with this frivolous case, which clearly had no legal basis, and it was one of the least defensible moments in my career, given the impossibility of serving process or proving jurisdiction. Story 34. Client's double jeopardy misunderstanding. Not a lawyer, but as a jailer and bailiff, I saw a guy steal a pickup truck, captured passed out on a sidewalk surrounded by drugs and guns. He represented himself, claiming double jeopardy since he'd been convicted of similar charges before. He admitted to the crimes, thinking it protected him, and got 20 years. Legal counsel could have cut a deal for 5. Story 35. Union worker sabotages himself post-warning. As a trades union representative, I dealt with an electrician, 25-plus years at the company, back after a 6-month suspension for kissing a staff member, with a final warning. 2 days later, he admitted talking about sex and condoms with a 14-year-old girl at a property, saying she should know better. We couldn't defend him. He lost pension, house, everything. Story 36. Client tries to sue for ex's self-cohabitation. Worked in family law in California for 2 years before quitting. A guy, getting hit hard with spousal support, knew it ends with cohabitation. He wanted me to argue his ex, a narcissist, was cohabiting with herself, her presence counting as a romantic partner. I refused, knowing it was indefensible and bordering on delusional. Story 37. Man wants to sue jeweler for brother's death. A man came to me wanting to sue for his brother's wrongful death, claiming he was strangled while fishing. When asked about the murderer, he said there wasn't one, wanting to sue the jeweler who made the ring that made him strangle his brother. I declined and contacted police, who chased him into the mountains but never found him. Story 38. Paralegal sees drug-fueled shooting case. I'm a paralegal. Local guy in his 20s decided to rob his dealer, got the wrong apartment, shot a college girl in the face when she opened the door, fled. She survived, paralyzed and deformed, found hours later. Jury saw he was strung out, bragged about it. He got 40-plus years. The driver also got jail time, hard to defend. Story 39. Ninja sword, dance goes wrong. I had a guy that thought he could impress a girl with his sword and ninja skills. He would show up at her house every few days with a sword, dressed in ninja gear. He would then go into some ninja dance whipping that sword around, every time becoming more intimidating. She'd call the cops, he'd take off and do it all over again in a few days. Finally got caught by a random patrol car in the area. Got a suspended sentence depending upon his completion of mental health programs. Weird thing beyond all that was that he spoke of himself in the third person. Oh, and he gave me one of his swords as a final payment. Story 40. Ceiling crash during police raid. Cops executed a warrant and my client, GF, opens the door, says he is not there. Except there is a huge pile of drywall and insulation on the floor of the hallway, and they hear someone wiggling around above the ceiling. Cops tell him they know he is up there and to come down, but rather than shimmy backward 5 feet, he just punched a new hole in the ceiling and crashed to the floor. Story 41. Defendant wore the exact crime outfit to court. I was on a jury where the defendant showed up in court day one wearing the same exact outfit as the unknown suspect in the video of the crime. It took only a few seconds before the judge immediately called a stoppage. All lawyers went into the back with the judge, and they came out like 7 minutes later, as announced the defendant had taken the plea deal. Wild. Story 42. Workers' comp claimant posts breakdance victory video online. Not my client, but the petitioner attorney's client. The man claimed workers' compensation and threw the kitchen sink at us, meaning he basically listed just over half of his body parts on the claim petition, stating that he injured each one. He was full of crap, and my firm knew it. Anyways, we were going to trial, and the day before we ran one more social media search. This absolute jerk posted a video of him winning a breakdance competition that was only a few months after the alleged work incident. Never saw a quicker dismissal in my life. Story 43. Client steals batteries right after bonding out of jail. Not an attorney, but one client of ours baffles me to this day. He had multiple cases, including aggravated battery and substance possession. At the insistence of dude's family, we moved heaven and earth getting him a bond, so that he could get out of jail and live with said family until the case was over. The whole process took weeks. Less than a day after getting out, he was caught stealing $16 worth of batteries from Target. Bond revoked. To be fair, the line between stupidity and compulsion is with this one. Edit. For anyone who is curious, we immediately ordered a psych eval for him. He was found competent, but it also confirmed what he had mental health issues. The Agbat charge ended up being dropped, and he took a plea for time served. Story 44. Widowers Club photos derail wrongful death settlement. My wife's lawyer bans all clients from using social media after he lost a big case. Wrongful death lawsuit where a man's wife was killed. Easy money. They were about to settle until the other side found his pictures online from a club a week after his wife died, getting a lap dance wearing a shirt that said, "I love MILFs." Apparently they did not think he had much pain and suffering anymore. Story 45. Injured worker admits to ignoring safety sign in testimony. Not a lawyer. Heard this story from a guy the first used to work with. His brother-in-law got injured at work and was suing for a hefty sum. Case was pretty much open and shut. All the evidence was in the BIL's favor. Until the BIL started talking. They asked him to tell them about the day of the accident. BIL started out fine, until he gets to where he approached the piece of equipment that injured him. He tell everyone that there was a note on it, stating that it was out of order. BIL then says that he discarded the note and used the equipment anyway. Story 46. Teen client confesses to random harm in corn silo. I had a kid, 17, who was mildly cognitively disabled due to brain trauma he sustained at the hands of his birth parents, who ended up with a really wonderful foster care family and thrived. He was a popular kid in school, good athlete, got a girlfriend, and invited her to meet up and be teenagers one night in a corn silo, which I guess is a thing that country kids do? By his account, they were having a nice time, and he was really enjoying himself. Then, for no particular reason, he picked up a 2x4 and bashed her skull in. He then used a combination of very crude farm implements, shovels, hose, to chop her body up and bury it in the corn, and went home like nothing had happened. Story 47. Client's phone reveals forced assault on drugged child. The first week I started at my current criminal defense firm, I was tasked with cataloging discovery from our client's phone. The phone had multiple, talking around 4,000, videos, photos, text exchanges with women under 16, though not all of the girls' ages were confirmed. Most, if not all, were under the legal age of consent, and many were barely pubescent, naked, and being prostituted over 1 year. He would lure these girls in exchange for substances. Nothing felt totally bizarre until I came across one video where he was clearly forcing himself upon a literal child who was so high on benzodiazepines, not willingly but rather forced, and choking her in the process. When our firm confronted him, he said he was in love with her and that's why he did it. Story 48. Defendant raises hand to identify himself in court. Reposting myself from years ago. Story from a friend of mine. He was defending a guy in court. Do not remember what he was charged with. The main witness for prosecution was on the stand and was asked if she could identify the defendant. She was scanning the courtroom and seemed confused. My friend was already silently celebrating because if she could not identify him, he could probably get all charged, dropped. As he was mentally adding this case to the win file, he happened to glance over at his client, who had just helpfully raised his hand to make it easier for her to identify him. Even the judge facepalmed on that one. Story 49. Client demonstrates full mobility in injury claim hearing. A lawyer I used to know was in court on a work injury case. The judge asked his client, "Just what is the nature of your injury?" His client replied, "I cannot raise my arm this high anymore," while she raised her arm up to show just how high she could not raise it. Story 50. Opposing lawyer faces implied malpractice after botched trial. I was prosecuting a contempt action in family court, something that basically never works, and everyone in the room could tell I was winning. The other side was unprepared, out of arrogance, and I was basically ripping this guy to shreds on cross-examination, which his lawyer did not even think would happen, because he expected the case to be dismissed. At the end of the trial, the judge ruled for me and stated that she found the defendant's testimony to be untrustworthy. I was shocked at winning a contempt trial to begin with, but then this exchange happened. Defendant's attorney: Your Honor, now that you have found my client's testimony to be untrustworthy, I am requesting a continuance in order to prepare further witnesses. This concept is shocking in and of itself, because to even think you can bring more witnesses after you rest your case is laughable. Judge: You had your shot and you missed, counsel. Defendant's attorney: Your Honor, there was no way I could have anticipated that you would find my client's testimony untrustworthy, and as such, I did not have the opportunity to prepare other witnesses in support of his position. Judge: That may be an argument for your carrier, counsel, but it holds no water with me. See you this afternoon for sentencing. For those who did not pick up on it, the judge basically told the lawyer on the record in front of his client that she expects him to get sued for malpractice because he messed up so royally. That crap was mind-blowing on multiple levels. Story 51. Client's delusional appeal against lawyer wastes time. A woman wanted me to sue her previous lawyer for charging her a lot of money, but producing almost no work to justify his fees. She gave me what she told me was the lawyer's total work product, a page printed off the internet, for which she said she was charged thousands of dollars for legal advice. She had already brought a claim via my jurisdiction's disciplinary body for lawyers. She had lost and wanted to bring an appeal. The judgment kept referring to documents that I had not seen. I pushed her to give me everything, and she came in with multiple files full of immaculate legal work that totally justified the fees she was fighting. We told her to get lost, but she wasted a lot of my time before we realized she was full of crap. Story 52. Graffiti artist's self-incriminating courtroom confession. A friend of mine was in a case where a guy was accused for graffiti vandalism, among other things, and the conversation with the judge went like this: Judge: Sir, did you make this graffiti? Defendant: No, I did not. J: But it has your signature at the end. D: Yes, an artist has to sign his work. Case closed. Story 53. Murderer threatens mother during trial. Digging deeper. This guy murdered his father. Then, during the trial, he sent death threats to his mother. Story 54. Hindu man demands lawsuit over unsolicited beef pizza. So this guy ordered a pizza. Nowhere was it specified that the delivery was supposed to be done under 30 minutes, but the guy assumed it because movies. The delivery arrived 1 hour later, and to apologize even if it was not necessary, they brought him his order and an additional beef pizza. The guy wanted our firm to sue them because he is Hindu, does not eat beef, and apparently felt offended. Story 55. Rookie lawyer's blunder costs company in embezzlement case. A lady was sacked by a large company. They had caught her embezzling money to fund a gambling habit. They had clear evidence the embezzling had occurred, and she did not deny it. She sued the company for $300,000 for unfair dismissal. My sister's firm represented the company against this woman. The case was so easy, the firm gave it to my sister as her first ever solo attempt. My sister screwed it up. Badly. Not only did she lose, the court awarded the woman $500,000, instead of the $300,000 she asked for. Story 56. Father's failed harm attempts on kids highlight mental illness. My dad told my mom he was going to decapitate me and my brother, so she knew what it was like to lose everything when she left him. This was after he cut the brake lines in her car, and a separate event where he barricaded me and my brother in the house, and tried to set it on fire in multiple areas with gasoline to add a bit of oomph. He was deadly serious, but also really stupid, and kept messing up his attempts. He is less harmful these days, which I think is nice. If you feel unsafe with your thoughts, please seek professional help. Story 57. Devout husband sues hospital for saving wife's life with hysterectomy. Not my client, but my dad, and the hospital he worked at, was sued by a gentleman after he saved his wife's life. Details. Patient is pregnant with 8th child and miscarries. The fetus is removed, but the patient starts bleeding uncontrollably. The only option available is a hysterectomy. It was either that, or she dies right there on the table. My dad gets called in to do the surgery, performs it successfully, hooray. The patient's husband is quite devout, and beyond pissed, that his wife cannot have any more kids. So he sued the hospital. Story 61. The repeat harm confession. My grandma was a lawyer, specializing in harm cases. A man comes in, saying he has been accused of murdering his wife. As my grandma starts asking questions, the man says that this was his second wife. She asks whether he got divorced, widowed, etc. The man goes, "I killed her, but I did my time in prison, and I swear I did not harm this one." Story 62. The pot-smelling court appearance. Client showed up reeking of pot and laughing inappropriately to drug possession pretrial proceedings. Story 63. The carpet corpse confession. Not strictly an answer to the question, but a few years ago this happened. A man had murdered someone. He knew that lawyers were partial and had the privilege of confidentially, so he walks into a lawyer's office, confessing the harm. With him, he has a rolled-up carpet, in which, he explains, there is a corpse. He asks the lawyer to advise him how to get rid of the body. The lawyer is an absolute boss, remains calm, asks the client to wait outside while he confers with fellow lawyers, and then calls 911. After a few minutes, the police arrive, and the man is arrested. Story 64. The mall lawyer hire. When they hired me, a lawyer with a degree and office in a mall. Story 65. The Courtroom Mouthing Off. We usually know right away if our client is guilty. It is just a matter of how long they will get, and if they can make a good impression on the judge to maybe get a better sentence. But as soon as someone mouths off in court, we know we are not getting them that plea deal anymore. Story 66. The Punitive Damages Jury Question. When, after a 6-week trial, the jury's first and only question during deliberation was whether $400 million was the maximum amount of punitive damages they could award. That was about when I lost all hope. Story 67. The Business Relationship Denial. Trial tech on a case where the defendant claimed that their customer and them did not have an ongoing business relationship, trying to get around provisions in the Uniform Commercial Code. Owner could not remember how much they ordered, how often, consider the plaintiff just a random customer, could not recall who their biggest customer was. Turns out plaintiff was not just the biggest customer. They were responsible for over half the total business. For over 30 years, parents did business together too. They marketed together, went on business sales trips together. Records showed they planned the entire operation around the plaintiff's historical order patterns each year. Once the plaintiff's lawyer was done questioning, everyone knew defendant was full of crap. Story 68. The DUI Nurse Testimony. I was on a jury for a DUI trial where a BF and girlfriend, mid-20s, were both drunk and decided to drive their young niece and nephew to their grandmother's house. The kids were in the back seat without seatbelts on when they wrapped the car around a telephone pole, killing both kids instantly. Of course, the two drunks survived because of a driver airbag and the passenger side seatbelt. Now, the drunks thought they were clever and decided if neither of them testified and admitted to driving, they could get off. Because if we had doubt about who was driving, you could not convict. A nurse from the hospital testified about treating both of the adults when they arrived. She testified that the male had airbag abrasions on his face, and the female had a distinct bruise from her right shoulder to her left hip, exactly where a seatbelt would be. It was all downhill from there. Story 69. The Zipper Down Demonstration. Mom was on a jury DUI, and they lawyer recites the lyrics from Johnny Boy, along with walking inappropriately to prove that because he forgot to zip up his pants does not mean he was drunk, as to infer that his defendant not turning her headlight on after leaving a bar at 2 a.m. didn't prove she was drunk. Story 70. The Incriminating Bag Admission. Judge Judy, what was in the bag? Prosecutor, my keys, wallet, gift cards, earpiece, etc. Defendant, Your Honor, there was not an earpiece. This video does not promote illegal activity. Shared for commentary.